for President Obama to say we want the banks to get lending again and we want Americans to keep borrowing. They want to reinflate the private debt market, the real estate market, back to its previous unaffordably high levels.
So the point you're making is they're saying it's okay to quote unquote print money as long as it's going to the banks,
yes.
But you can't print money. The reason I'm going quote unquote because you don't really have to print it. It's just like tap it
it's
into
all
the,
on a computer keyboard now. They don't even have
but they won't create that same kind of money in order to get the real economy going.
Right. Now, it's just amazing that the people who are talking about let's get the government debt under control are only then following it by saying, so cut back Social Security and squeeze labor and cut back social spending. Not a single person is saying cut back the giveaways to the bank, stop trying to reinflate the market. To the Obama administration and to the Republicans, they're saying more private debt is the solution. Well, in reality, the problem is private debt, not the government debt. And that's because, unlike government debt, private debts have to be repaid. And there are only two ways of resolving a private debt problem for an economy as a whole. Either you do the American way, which is foreclosure, and essentially foreclose on the real estate, or you write down the debts to the ability that can be paid. Now, in the past, when you had a financial crisis, the banks would have to liquefy the loans, they'd take the loss on the loans, the debts would be written down to whatever the market could afford. That was the old market solution to the debt problem. But now the government is saying we cannot have a market solution to the debt problem because our constituency, our largest campaign contributors, the banks, would lose. So we have to keep the debts in place, and in fact, we have to have even more debt to reinflate the real estate market so that the banks won't lose any money on the fact that they've lent too much money that cannot be repaid. So you have something very interesting. The largest form of debt in America is real estate debt by homeowners. When I first went to work on Wall Street in 1961, everybody had to there was a rule of thumb on Wall Street. If you were taking out a home mortgage, they would limit it, the mortgage payment couldn't exceed 25% of your income. That was a rule of the thumb. The banker would ask, how much money do you make? And they'd say, okay, you can afford to pay 25% of that in debt. Well, then the banks began to make larger and larger loans. So last year, Sheila Bair, the head of the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, said she recommended limiting the amount of mortgage debt service to 32% of the loans. Well, just a few months ago, the Federal Housing Agency of the government said, okay, the government will guarantee 9 out of every 10 mortgages in America are now guaranteed by the Federal Housing Administration to the banks for up to 43% of the income of the borrower to be paid to the banks as mortgage service. Now, just imagine what that does to a family. If you're paying 43% of your income to the banks for your mortgage, if you're paying, some people are paying 25% of their income for student loans, but forget student loans. Let's say only 10% of your income above that goes for other bank loans, credit card loans. You have 15% of your salary taken out for Social Security, and then you have income tax. Then you're only going to be able to spend about 20% of your salary on the goods and services you produce.
And then they wonder why there's no demand in the economy.
That's exactly the point. It's all about demand and employment. And